Congratulations, Mayor, on getting through that without being too emotional.
Oh no, I cried a lot. I was just trying to keep it in. But no, I'm so glad we did that. It may feel a bit self-indulgent, but you know what? People who put their names forward for public service, there's a lot of great things about it. There's a lot of great reasons to do it, but it's hard. It's hard on families. It's hard on your personal life. It's hard on your health. And everyone deserves gratitude for putting their name forward, especially for municipal government, where it's just you. There's no party. It's just you and your name and your reputation. And so I'm just really proud of all the folks who are stepping back. And as we get into this generational shift in our council and in the future of Calgary, I thought it was important to take a moment and just say thank you to folks.
When you talked about the many voices still that aren't heard, what were you referring to?
You know, last year in July, we had the unprecedented anti-racism public hearing here at council. And you know, during that public hearing, I thought to myself, I wasn't really surprised by anything I heard because it's my lived experience. But then I thought to myself, you know what? I'm old. And if 20-year-olds now are going through the same things that I went through 30 years ago when I was their age, it means we got to do better. And it was an eye-opener for me because I would have thought that over these last 11 years being in this role and working so hard to listen to people, that people would have felt heard. But even then, I realized that there comes a time when you got to make room for folks. And ultimately that was the root of my decision to not seek re-election. No, I don't think so. I think that I've made it clear, and I'll continue to make it clear, that this is a very serious election. And we have to be able to elect people who can meet this moment, this critical juncture in our history. And ultimately, citizens will do what's right, but I encourage everyone to not go for the easy solutions. Not just the, I'm going to cut your taxes and maintain your services, but actually to ask candidates what is their vision for the city and how will they solve the very real crises that we're facing: economic, environmental, public health, mental health, racism, equity, and ultimately we need people who can do that. Well, that said, I am going to endorse one person. I've already done it. Nancy Close, who has worked with me for many years, is seeking her old job back as Calgary School Board trustee, and citizens of Calgary would be well served by having her back in that role, and I'm grateful that she's chosen to do that.
Why endorse her?
Because she's awesome, and because it's for the school board, not for city council. I was surprised by how many people cried today. I was surprised by how much I cried today. You know, I will tell you that I am very difficult to surprise because I am a gossip and I need to know everything about everything about everything, and none of my friends can keep a secret. So when I walked in and saw, when I was there and these folks walked in with purple balloons and a big banner, and it was a bunch of folks who've been working with me since 2010, that was really something. And I took a quick glance at social media during the meeting today and saw that people across the city have echoed that day in 2010 when they wrote "Vote Nenshi" on sidewalks with chalk, and there are sidewalks across the city covered in chalk. Yeah, that wasn't very nice to do to me this morning because I was trying to keep it together. But I'm deeply grateful, again, for people's support, everlasting support through all these years.
Didn't it start a little earlier, sir? Like when you literally were in your driveway?
It did. It did. I opened my garage door this morning and my own driveway had been completely done up, which made me go, is this okay security-wise? But you know what? It's fine.
We've heard a little bit of your commentary on the federal election.
Yes.
Are you going to, if not endorse a candidate, are you going to start weighing in on the issues that are emerging?
Thank you for that question and welcome back. It's great to have you back. You know, I think I already have. And certainly I've said since April that if there's misinformation, if there are folks who are misrepresenting what the city can and will do, I will not hesitate to call it out. You know, I'll give you an example. One of the people running for mayor made a comment about how the Minister of Municipal Affairs did not act in the Joe Maglioka expense matter. And the minister's former press secretary tweeted going, "That's up to council, not up to the minister," which is blatantly wrong. Council did the sanctions that we were able to do, and I would have thought that the former press secretary to the minister would have known that the next step in the real sanction of removing someone from council is only in the minister's hand, and that minister flatly refused to investigate his friend Councillor Maglioka.
While we're on that topic, has there been that letter of apology that council asked for?
There has not.
Were you surprised by Joe's announcement to run and work too?
I suppose everyone has their own definition of courage. I thought it was pretty brave to run on the record that he brings into the election.
Other topics?
Other topics.
What are your thoughts on the city's decision to pull back from the vaccine mandate, and now it's willing to look at rapid testing as an alternative?
Well, we haven't really, and this has been a matter of some confusion, because we are developing a policy and we're looking at the jurisprudence and we're looking at what other employers are doing. But let me be very clear: we expect that city colleagues, the people who work for the city of Calgary, be vaccinated, and we expect that they be fully vaccinated by November 1st. For folks who have religious or medical exemptions, we will accommodate as well as we can. We are discussing whether folks who can work 100% remotely could perhaps be exempt from that requirement. But ultimately, there will be very few, if any, pathways for folks who are just belligerent and don't want to get a vaccine and don't have a reason to be able to continue working, particularly if they're working with the public or with other citizens.
But has the city not now created that pathway and saying rapid testing is now an alternative, just if you don't want to take the vaccine?
Rapid testing will be an alternative for a period of time while everyone is getting fully vaccinated. It is not at all clear that that will continue.
Will you be discussing this meeting, the possibility that was raised in the emergency management committee about requiring the vaccine for some city services?
Yes, we will be. And I believe that because the government of Alberta has been so slow to act on actual proof of vaccination, I feel that we probably won't be able to make a decision on that today, but we may delegate that authority to the city manager such that when there is an easy proof of vaccine, if we can implement that within city facilities. There's certainly, council very clearly said we are in favor of proof of vaccination for all public non-essential services. But we just have to figure out how we might be able to implement that in city facilities.
So you're saying the city will implement that?
Yeah, I mean, to be very, very clear, most provinces have brought in a system and a mandate. The Premier's been quite clear that they're working on a system, but they're not interested in a mandate, and it's up to others to make their own choices. But if that system exists and we can implement it at low cost to the taxpayer, I think we should put it in place.
Is it possible for the city to do anything outside of these city-owned facility or city services? Simple as the mask bylaw. Is there a way to do a group vaccination program for across the city of Calgary?
It's an excellent question, and it's a very tenuous legal area. The city only has the powers that it is given under the Municipal Government Act by the province. And the mask bylaw, shall we say, took us quite a ways in the interpretation of that provision. The general feeling is that we do not have the power to impose a vaccine mandate across the city. If things get worse and the province continues to refuse to act, then that may well be something we'd like to test.
A vaccine mandate or a proof of vaccine for entry?
What we can't do, I don't think we can do a proof, well, let's put it this way. At that point, if it becomes a city issue, then I think there's no distinction between those two things.
Has there been any discussion about having city contractors to the city, requiring them to be vaccinated, like what President Biden announced last week?
Our number of contractors versus city staff is much lower than it might be in the U.S. government, but I know that that is one of the things that is under discussion as we're creating this policy, but I don't think any decisions have been made yet.
Some of these protests that have been happening, as well as these hospital protests.
My feelings on these protests are very clear. The hospital protests are, in a word, disgusting. The healthcare workers have been working so hard, they're burnt out, they're just trying to keep people alive. and they do not deserve that. And if you show up and try to prevent someone from getting emergency medical care or make healthcare workers feel bad about their lives, you are the worst kind of human being.
Did you hear about the university's announcement this morning, sir?
No.
There are 9 Alberta universities are bringing in a vaccine mandate, including the UC and Alberta.
Didn't they already announce that at UFC?
There won't be any more rapid testing.
Well, there won't be any more.
Starting in the winter semester, January 1.
Yeah, and exactly. We have lots of big employers and organizations moving in this direction. It's extremely clear that the Alberta government is woefully out of step with what the public is demanding and what employers are doing. And so I really do hope that the province will finally find its way to the truth and act. You know, I hope that we'll get an hour-long speech from the Premier where he meanders around his political philosophy and finally says, I don't want to do this, but it's the right thing to do. So fingers crossed, hope springs eternal.
Just related to that, when you have large institutions like that, tens of thousands of people affected by that, and it's not coming from the government, what does that say to you?
It's a complete abdication and failure of leadership on the part of the government of Alberta.
So where do you see that going forward?
Well, ultimately, we have big banks, we have airlines, we've got public sector employers, we've got the entire federal government employees, plus federal contractors and federally regulated industries, planes and trains, all moving in this direction, which basically, it really does show that the emperor has no clothes, that the premier can rant and rail as much as he wants about freedom of choice. He can direct his interest to a tiny vocal minority instead of the vast majority of Albertans, and guess what? It ain't gonna matter. Ultimately, people will do it without him, and I think that'll be a bit of a surprise for him.
Your Worship, last question.
Is there a larger price to pay there? Like when you see, BC's now doing the requirements starting today to, be able to get into a restaurant, you have to be able to prove your status. Alberta, being seen as a laggard. I mean, how do you think that's going to play out in the national context?
The day that the Premier announced that there would be, or the day that Dr. Hinshaw announced that there would be no more testing or tracing or isolation, we lost 5 major conventions from Calgary that day. And in my economic development work, I can tell you the number one question that I get asked, and my colleagues at Calgary Economic Development get asked, is why would I move to Alberta with that provincial government? How in the world would I attract young people to want to live there when it's so retrograde? And the Premier and his cabinet have to come to terms with this and understand they're doing long-term damage to the brand of Alberta.
Which 5 conventions?
Well, I don't know, but I do know there were 5. One of them is thinking they'll come back. All right, thank you everybody.